Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges. All right, here we go. I'm one of your hosts today, Aaron Snyder.
And I'm Angie Fryermuth.
Today's guests are here to talk about real estate, and we have Ms. Johnson-Muic, the Chief of Real Estate for the Corps Headquarters, Ashley Klimaszewski, who's the Chief of Real Estate for Louisville District, and Todd Czarnecki, who's the Chief of Real Estate at Northwestern Division. Thanks all for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Aaron.
So, Ms. Johnson-Muic, could you get us started? Could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and really your path within USACE, how you came to be the Chief of Real Estate at Headquarters?
So I've been with the Corps Real Estate Organization for just a little over 30 years now, and I started in the Pittsburgh district, came in as an attorney advisor, and then switched over into the Realty Specialist series and spent about 15 years in Pittsburgh. And in very late 2004, they were having a staff reduction in the district, and I left to come to the Southwestern Division real estate team in Dallas, Texas. And I came in as kind of an acquisition planning specialist there, and then became the chief of real estate in SWD in 2009. And then recently, in just June of 2021, I am in an interim director position for real estate at the headquarters until they can get out and recruit and permanent fill for the position.
Great, thanks. Ashley, how about you?
So I started my career with USACE in 2003. I've been with the Corps for about 18 years now. And I started as a student in real estate in the Nashville district, actually. So I spent the majority of my career there in Nashville. And then I had the opportunity to apply for the deputy chief's job in the Louisville district in 2018. So that's when I came to the team here. And I'm a new chief of real estate, so I just took on that position last August. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. I have to give a shout out there to the class of 2003 because that's when I was hired as well. So good thing. Todd, how about you?
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so I've been with the Corps of Engineers for about 13 years now. The past 8 years with Northwestern Division. Prior to that, I spent about 3 years at Headquarters USACE, working at the office that Ms. Johnson-Muic currently is the director of. And then prior to that, I was at our Walla Walla district office, a district within our region at NWD, as the chief of real estate. Prior to the Corps, I was with the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, which is the Corps' counterpart that services facility engineering for the Navy and Marine Corps. And I got started in real estate out of college in what was the Navy's counterpart to our DA intern program. I got in at the very initial years of military housing privatization. And it was in working through that program that I was able to become, more aware of real estate in general. And it was in 2009 when I was as part of some family desires looking for a change, and that's when my family at the time, we moved to Walla Walla and began work with the Corps. So 28 years, and I can't believe I'm able to say that. It's gone so fast.
Thank you all for being with us today, and thank you for your service. It's great to hear the backgrounds of our guests. Today, we're going to learn more about real estate, and I think oftentimes it's a mission that people outside of the Corps don't necessarily think of when they think of the Corps of Engineers, but it's a very important role. So, Ashley, can you tell us the role that real estate plays in mission execution within the Corps?
Absolutely. So one of the really neat things about real estate with the Corps is that we have a very diverse mission. We have a civil works mission where we manage property around lake projects. We resolve encroachment issues. We even work with local project sponsors to acquire real estate for continuing authorities projects. We assist with disaster relief efforts. We dispose of or divest of property that's no longer needed for use by the government. We grant use of property that's not immediately needed for project purposes, and what that does is help us reduce our O&M costs of owning property. A lot of it provides recreational opportunities on the lakes. We also have a military mission, and our military programs support our Army installations around the country. So we often help them with management of their property as well through leasing property that's not immediately needed. We also do timber sales, which I think a lot of people don't realize we do, which is really cool. We can dispose of property at their request. And, we also help other military services as requested, such as the Air Force. They may require our assistance on acquisition projects that they might be doing. So we also support the Army Reserves, and we acquire property for them for military use. And then we also have a recruiting mission, and the recruiting program supports the DoD Armed Forces recruiting mission. And so we're basically the leasing agent for DoD. So our team goes out and acquires space to meet their requirements. We manage build out of the space to their specifications, and then we manage those leases after they're put in place. So that's a few of the areas that we have. I know there's probably more that I'm leaving out because it really is a diverse mission, but that's one of the really cool things about working in real estate for the Corps.
I think one of the things I continuously am amazed by in talking to folks through the Corps is how diverse the organization is and the many different missions. So it seems like, real estate fits right in with that. It really makes me wonder, like, being so diverse, and really working across the military missions and also the civil works missions. Ms. Johnson-Muic, could you tell us a little bit just about how you're organized and how you're able to manage all of this workload?
Well, that's getting more and more challenging by the day as we talk about that. But yeah, we're in almost every district. Not quite every district has a real estate organization. There's a couple where they're supported by another district in their region. But we've got, and in our districts, chiefs of real estate, they've usually got kind of a, generally speaking, an acquisition planning type workforce who handles all sort of that new project stuff coming online. They've got a management and disposal workforce, and then they've got kind of a technical support group that provides our mapping and our GIS and our appraisal services. And in some places we're organized, divided by civil and military, but in large part we're organized more by areas of specialty. And we also serve in some of what Ashley was talking about. We also sometimes service other federal agencies, like work for others. So we've done work for Department of Homeland Security and CBP on the border. We do work for EPA and DOE and several other federal agencies who come to us for land-related transactions. So I think we may be one of the only sort of soup to nuts real estate organizations in the federal government, to include sort of cradle to grave services for real property. It's a challenge when we get these new projects in to try to figure out what the right organizational structure is. We use PMOs, program management offices, in some cases for special programs that are going to be maybe a year or two in length or even longer, where we need to sort of centralize the management of it. So we sort of morph to the need, if you will, in terms of structure and trying to leverage our expertise, that we have in each of our regions. One of the other things about real estate that you might not know that's a big part of how we operate is a warrant system. So you think of your FAR contracting officers, and they have warrants to sign government FAR contracts on, for construction and other services. We sign real estate instruments. We have delegation from the Department of Army Installation, Housing, and Partnerships. We have a delegation and a warrant system inside of USACE. So we have warranted real estate contracting officers in our regions and in our districts to actually execute the instruments for the various missions that we talked about.
Thanks for that. So Aaron and I are part of the Revolutionize USACE Civil Works team, and we are always working with others to revolutionize the way that the Corps does business. And so I'm curious, how is real estate revolutionizing your business processes or models?
Say we probably all have something maybe from a different vantage point on that one. Maybe I can start and then Todd can chime in. You know, we're using that vernacular kind of more recently. There are lots of ways in which we need to improve the way we do business, and there's lots of pressure to go faster, to execute at the lowest levels, and there are a number of ways in which we're looking at trying to do that. Some of it is simply educational. We have had a large number of new employees come into real estate. I think, I don't know the exact number, but I think 50% of our staff, our community of practice, which numbers about 1,000, have less than 10 years of experience. And in the diversity of the program that we work in, there's a lot to learn and a lot to know. There are a lot of rules and regulations and policies and whatnot. And so we are working on some key areas that we want to highlight some training to make sure the field knows what their authorities are and where they have room to flex and where they have to come to a higher headquarters. So that's one way we're doing it, and sort of updating some of our policy gaps. And so I think I'll just throw that out to start with and then let the others chime in.
So, Aaron, picking up where Paula left off, in terms of business processes and policies, real estate has defined business processes for our 25 product and services. And each year, all the MSC real estate offices with the headquarters office, we work together to update a group of those 25 product and services, applying lessons learned, input from the subcop, changes that would help us with acknowledging, what the latest best delivery method is for real estate product and services. That's something that we have continued to do since the inception of what was once the QMS, the Quality Management System, and is now into Qualtrics. So that, I think, is a big thing, especially looking at it from a regional perspective. And then one other thing is, especially with the workload situation where we have just an incredible capability challenge with delivering the program, just for real estate seems to continuously grow. It's so important that as a regional body, we coordinate together in program delivery. We acknowledge that each district has that lead execution role for its area of responsibility, but there are situations that come up where workforce fluctuates, where there's some niche skill sets, where there's just some particular circumstances of work that we have to do a surge towards execution. And as an MSC, we're best positioned to help coordinate across the region to provide those resources so that, with respect to, getting something done, we're able to achieve that with the least amount of impact that otherwise we would incur for that project or that program.
So Todd, real quick, a follow-up question to that. So you mentioned sharing lessons learned and then the coordination across the region. I know that this is something that other missions across the Corps are really trying to figure out. Are there any good tips or tricks that you can share with others on how to successfully share lessons learned across a mission function such as real estate, and then also little info on how you're successfully coordinating across the region and then vertically up to headquarters?
Yeah, so a few tools, and then I would imagine Ashley and Paula might have some as well, but the ones that come to mind for me, first, the more formal approach. There's a SharePoint site that our headquarters USACE Real Estate office hosts where we can submit lessons learned and post those for the enterprise. Second, we have a very active subcop set for real estate where through that subcop medium, lessons learned are able to be shared. There's also our boards. Yeah, nationally, we have the Board of Realty Governors, where chaired by Ms. Johnson-Muic. all the MSC chiefs. We have one district chief that, as well, and then other folks as necessary, where the lessons learned certainly is something that comes up over the course of business for the board. And then the last one I wanted to highlight for NWD, we have a regional real estate board comprised of all 5 district real estate chiefs, all of my branch chiefs at NWD and myself. We meet at least once a month. Providing lessons learned information is something that is done at least once, if not numerous times on a given monthly meeting. Paula or Ashley?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. This is Paula. One of the things that we're doing, Todd mentioned the subcosts, which I think is a big one, and one of the best ways in which to take the lessons learned. But even just in our individual offices, like speaking for the headquarters team, we have a number of people on our staff who were either new to the Corps or newer, younger in years or experience. And so I'm finding that I need to create time and be deliberate about it, to have a forum for those folks where we can talk about a work package maybe we just finished in one region that they didn't have visibility of in case it comes up in theirs, and sort of cross-pollinate and make sure that we're using a shared file system where everybody can access those documents when something like it does come up, and we have some uniformity in how we're filing electronically for easy access and searching through. So we're not reinventing the wheel all the time. And sometimes we fumble through the simplest things of a template, or, gee, I remember you had one of these, but then nobody can find the files. And so just conquering some of that small day-to-day stuff in your current office and having a system for that everybody can buy into and provide some value for sort of some cross-training or discussion. I find that I think that it's imperative for our management team all the way down to branch and section level to be doing that with their staff, whether it's a brown bag where you can play games and quiz on things in the regulations, or make it fun, but there's got to be some deliberate effort to working that kind of lesson learn and training stuff on a regular basis with the staff. So over to you, Ashley.
I think you guys have covered this very well. Active subcop participation. We're having to go digital with everything now, so we have to figure out ways to share information digitally and make sure it gets to people so they can see that. Even at the district level, we try to look at ways to, as Paul said before, we're kind of pressured sometimes to go faster, and I think that we can use technology to our advantage sometimes and where we can. So we can look at things like doing digital signatures on documents and passing information back and forth with people to get those things back a little faster. And it kind of cuts down on your mailing time. I mean, there's simple things you can do, like when we collect money for rent, we can do that through pay.gov, which is, something that someone can take and they put their bill number in online and they pay it online. So just things like that can cut back on processing time, even at the district level.
No, I think that's all great. And as part of the Revolutionized team, I think I want to pivot a little bit here and talk a little bit about some challenges that we've heard from within real estate. And one, I think our listeners would definitely expect us to ask you about non-standard estates and what that means. And I've worked in the planning side with a number of sponsors, and it seems like they're always wanting to do something just a little bit different when it pertains to a non-standard estate or acquisition of real estate, I should say. And they'll say, oh, it's a ecosystem project, and we just want to get a flowage easement on that piece of property versus the standard estate, I believe, is fee title. So, Ms. Johnson-Muic, could you tell us a little bit about what the standard estates are, why they're important, and then when a district is exploring the use of a non-standard estate, what they should be doing as part of that process?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Aaron. So it is a big area of discussion these days throughout the Corps at all levels. And we have 26 standard estates in our published policy of real estate regulation. And those estates have been in place for several decades. And what they do, estate is the part of a conveyance where you're transferring a piece of property to me, and the estate represents the rights you're giving to me. And so the language is the critical part of any real estate deed, whether it's an easement or fee. And so, the writing of that estate language is the critical part. It defines what I can do after I receive the grant and what you can do, if anything, afterwards. And so it's critical that we acquire the rights necessary to allow construction and operation and maintenance of the federal engineered project, and to make sure that it can perform in a way for as long as it's authorized to achieve the benefits that were part of justifying the investment in the first place. And so that's why it's so important. And I liken it a lot to partnership agreements. When we want to change language in partnership agreements, that still has to come up to headquarters, because it's so important that we get that contractual agreement between us and our partner correct. And we're treating all of our partners equitably across the country, and not doing something weird in one state and that we can't, we're not doing in another state. So non-standard estates are very similar. And so we try to encourage the field to stick to the standard, because that is going to be the fastest way to construction. But there are always exceptions to every rule, and so we have to consider non-standard estates in some cases, and they come up most frequently in ecosystem restoration projects, where our standard is fee, because we typically think that we need to control everything that happens on that property to protect the improvements that we're putting in there. So we can't have hunters trampling it down, or somebody tearing out the plants that we just put in for their electric line or whatever. But we've, allowed room for the use of easements in ecosystem. But in order to approve an easement for an ecosystem project, we have to have very specific language in the estate that matches the project design elements and construction elements, and it has to be legally enforceable in that state. And all of that ends up resulting in something that needs to be looked at headquarters. And we're under a lot of pressure to power down and to not require those estates to come to headquarters. But the reality is that is not just a real estate policy, but a civil works policy to try to protect the federal investment and the engineered solution that we're trying to accomplish. So that's a lot in a nutshell, but I'll stop there and see if you want to ask me anything else.
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess one follow-up question is you'd mentioned we have 26 standard estates that have been around for decades. Is there been any discussion of maybe adding some additional ones for some of those common situations that you see, like the ecosystem projects and more of an easement versus fee title?
I have had some recent discussion just in my short time at headquarters with ASA Civil Works staff, and maybe even a little bit of conversation with Department of Justice, who all play a role in the crafting of the language in those estates. But that's a huge undertaking to look at whether we need to rewrite any of those or publish new. It's a very difficult thing without a designated team to do. And one of the reasons why an ecosystem easement has not been developed as a standard is because what I mentioned earlier, the language is generally tailored to that exact project and the features of that project, and not a lot of them are alike. And also the state laws have to be taken into consideration too. So something that we draft that's approvable in one state might not be able to be used in another. So the legal review and the legal sufficiency is a very important part of working on that. And the DOJ pieces, if we ever condemn, or our sponsors have to condemn, we have to be sure that what we've acquired or asked our sponsors to acquire is defensible for our project. And so it's a complicated equation. And I do think there's going to come a time where we need to update or look at those estates, and that's something that we'll have to get some momentum behind and get some resources assigned to.
No, I think that's helpful to demonstrate really how complicated it is. I mean, for me, anytime you have to involve Department of Justice, it sounds like it's going to take a little bit of extra work. So I appreciate that input on that. So I wanted to move over to Ashley and Todd on this. Just curious, like, what challenges have you guys seen or do you see day to day in delivery of the real estate mission?
we can't go fast enough. I mean, they want to, yeah, I mean, that really is it. I mean, could you just go faster? And we've actually, you know, in the old days, in a lot of our older regs, we worked in a very sequential process where there was planning, and then planning ended, you know, it was recon and feasibility, and then there was a big design phase, and design was 100% done. And then we would turn to land acquisition, whether it was full federal or non-federal sponsor, more and more to try to move the schedules to the left and dig dirt sooner. We want to do these activities concurrently. And there's a lot of, not a great deal of understanding outside of real estate of how much we are impacted by the design information and the footprint of where you need to be on the ground. And any changes that occur during design have a big impact on our product. So if you give me a 65% design solution and say, here's your footprint, I say, great, I'm going to go out and get some land surveys, and I'm going to write legal descriptions for that land now. And then at 85%, you say, oh, I'm so sorry, I thought I needed 15 foot here, but now it's 30, you know, foot in width. Well, my whole product isn't any good anymore, and I got to go back and restart. And then the same thing for the appraisal that we did on the 15-foot wide easement instead of 30. And so it's really working with our teammates outside of real estate to nail down the requirements, because we don't drive those requirements. Somebody else does, usually the designers and those who are constructing. And I've had conversations with PM, or, you know, where I will say, well, listen, I can get going sooner. We can go out and buy a whole bunch of property for you, and then you'll just have to work with it, design and build within it. And then they look at me and go, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea, you know? And I go, well, but that's the only, I don't know what else to buy. Like a crayon drawing in our business doesn't really work. And so we have this ongoing dialogue and tension, and it's healthy, but it's challenging. It's very challenging.
Yeah, that's for sure. Todd or Ashley, anything to add?
So yes, acquisition projects can get intense, as you can see, and they usually have visibility. And like Paul said, they stick to strict schedules. So there's always a lot of pressure. What can we do now? What can we do now? Where can we take some risk? And that comes up more and more and more. So it's a domino effect for sure, as she illustrated very well. One small change causes a huge domino effect in the real estate world. I can switch gears a little bit. We could talk about other acquisition challenges if you want to. But yeah, one of the things I think that people don't realize is how we intermingle with other agencies and how their policy changes can also sometimes affect us in real estate. We have a delegation of authority from General Services Administration to do lease acquisition that fits within certain parameters, of course. They allow us to do that. And if they make one small policy change within their agency, then that trickles down to us as well, change our processes and be able to implement those policy changes. So that's another area of real estate where, you know, small changes here cause a ripple effect nationwide, really.
So I would like to chime in again to not just to focus on the acquisition side, but just in general a challenge. Like our business is pretty complicated. We have complicated delegations and authorities, and a lot of close connection to the legal team in what we do. I don't think it's very well understood in the Corps. You know, a lot of the commanders, you know, I know we're about the business of constructing, and in real estate as a support, you know, organization, sort of a necessary evil, if you will. And a lot of the commanders would rather not have to deal with the minutia of real estate, and they just kind of want simple answers. And I sometimes struggle to get, you know, in the more complex things that we do or high visibility projects to make it as simple as they would like. And it's just a challenge in the communicating, you know, with our engineer partners and the other. And so I am a big advocate on learning the roles of everyone on the PDTs and really, I mean, no one's going to spoon feed one another. We all have to understand what the others need and have really good communication. I think that will help us a little bit, but it's an ongoing struggle to say, like, for me to articulate why I need to know something about the electric lines and gas lines and water lines in a project. You know, why does real estate need to know about that? But there are real estate transactions likely tied to those. And we have trouble sometimes getting our teammates to know, partly because we're not explaining it well or being proactive about what information we need and when and why we need it. And that's just something we have to learn to do better to try to help our teammates understand, you know, our business a little bit more. We really are trying to help everyone get to the finish line. It's just not understood well, I guess. And I think that's a big challenge that we're facing. And I know I'm thinking about on a regular basis about how to make it more understandable so we can all be asking the right questions, you know, at the right time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you that it's very important to make sure that all PDT members know each other's mission and role so that we can work together and make sure that we're accomplishing the mission right the first time. So being civil servants, I know that we have to go through a lot of bureaucratic processes and challenges that make us want to bang our head against the wall. But part of being a civil servant is also the rewards of helping the general public. And so I want to talk about what has been the most rewarding part of your job. And so, Todd, can you talk a little bit about the most rewarding project that you've worked on within real estate?
Wow, that's pretty hard to pick. You know, just looking across my region in the role that I've been in, you know, we're working to support our military installations, both Army and Air Force. Our big inland waterway mission. We've got multiple river systems that we are responsible for at NWD. Disaster response mission, and the things that come for attention. And the one that I think that comes to mind is the alternative care facility mission that we had for the onset of the pandemic back in 2020. You know, real estate was front and center of that. You got to have access to the property in order for the Army or its contractors to outfit these facilities with the medical equipment and personnel to support the pandemic. And so real estate had to move very quickly, had to coordinate broadly, not only internal to the Corps, but with multiple agencies outside and do so in swift order in order to get these alternative care facilities up and going and ready. So Enrique Godinez of my team, our districts, our headquarters folks, and then the other MSCs too that were involved. This was something that truly was a full enterprise undertaking, and I felt we were very successful at delivering that. I think that's the most proud one that I can think of right now.
How about you, Ashley?
I think one of the most rewarding aspects of working in real estate is that I get to learn something new all the time. We have some very unique projects that come up, and you have to adjust. You have to move those projects forward, and you have to figure out how to do it. We're always getting thrown some interesting curveballs in our projects for sure. So I feel like I'm always learning something. Even though I've been doing this for a long time, I do feel like I learn something new from someone every day. The real estate community in general is just amazing to work with. I think we have such an amazing support network. I have made friends and had numerous opportunities to work on special projects. I've worked in New Mexico, DC, Honolulu, and been able to live there on developmental assignments. I mean, that's pretty amazing. There's just been so many opportunities that I've had over the years. So that's really awesome. And then I think one of the most recent transactions that I worked on and actually worked closely with Paula on this is that we were asked by the Department of State to help them place Afghan refugees at some of our military installations across the country. Even though I was a small part of that because we had one of those in our area of responsibility that we covered, That was pretty amazing to be a part of that. I recently got to go to that installation on other business, but I went by to visit the DPW there on the installation. And they gave me a tour, showed me where some of the refugees were staying, and it was pretty amazing to see that. There are a lot of children there. I think they said over almost half of those refugees were under the age of 18. So when you think about the situation they came from, and that we got to be a small part of that, was pretty rewarding for me.
Yeah, this is Paula. And I echo what Ashley and Todd have said. It would be very difficult for me to pick out a project or accomplishment. I think what I would focus on is it really is the battle buddies. A real estate community is a close-knit community. We work hard to keep our lines of communication open. It really is, people talk about the core family. I think we really feel that in our community of practice. It's really your battle buddy who understands best the challenges and accomplishments, and even if the rest of the organization doesn't necessarily. And so, I feel like that's a huge part of the benefit in the organization. And from my perspective, there is always a new challenge, and I like that personally. If it were all easy and repetitious, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun from my perspective. It's more rewarding when you can work through a challenge and solve it. And maybe not everybody's happy, but you get that project moving forward, and you get to the end of the finish line, and you try to learn from it and apply it moving forward. So, I'm kind of in the later stages of my career. I think now, mostly what I want to do is try to pass some of that on, and working on building the bench and making sure the information is available to those who are coming on next, because the mission's always going to be there, and there's always going to be a next important mission like the OAW. We couldn't have forecasted that Afghan support mission, but it came in and we were able to execute what was needed, and people worked extra hours and they didn't complain, and everybody just, what can I do? What do I need to do? And it was just a really, it's pretty, we have some amazing people in the Corps, not just in real estate, but throughout, but certainly, really proud of our real estate team and the things that they can come together to accomplish. So I think that, that's in a nutshell, some of the most rewarding pieces of it.
No, that's all really good. And it's interesting always to hear just the personal perspectives and the opportunities that you all have had, and really just how broad the mission is for you. It really helps to give perspective to some of us that maybe have just worked with you on a civil works project here and there. And I think you're right. It's not necessarily understood well what real estate means. And that partially comes, I think, from, our side of the table too, where, we see real estate every day, almost like, everybody owns property or could own a house or something like that. But so we think we understand it. But the reality is there's so much more to it than we probably see. So we kind of put you in a hard spot to deliver. And then not to mention, you're on the tail end of the design process, but you're also the very first step that the sponsors have to be able to accomplish to get their land in place. So, I think we all need to make sure we communicate better as PDTs and work together on the understanding and just figure out where there can be some flexibility there. But I really want to thank you all for joining us here today, Ms. Johnson-Muic, Ashley, and Todd, for this edition of Inside the Castle. We appreciate you and your insights. To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What topics are important to you and people you're interested in hearing from? Until next time, be safe, be innovative, and be revolutionary. Thanks for joining us for this Inside the Castle podcast. To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.